I'll give you guys a little testimony before I get started. Kind of already told your pastor a little bit about myself, but I start off telling folks in churches about this part of my testimony just because I believe it's real connected to mission work, and really I think it'd be a blessing to you guys too as far as what you deal with every day. And I know one of the worst things about the Christian life that we look at it is kind of what my dad used to call routine duty, and you get such in a habit of doing things like coming to church, and after a while it's just coming to church. You know, you go out and do something for the Lord, it's just going and doing it, and you kind of lose that motivation there, and before you know it, you're not really interested in doing it, you're just doing it out of habit, and you end up getting discouraged, and there's so many things that can happen. But the Lord lets you know, be not weary in well doing, for in due season you shall reap if you faint not. And for me, I need some things, I need some stories, I need some accounts of my life to encourage me, to keep me going, to keep me motivated about what's going on in the Christian life. Because the devil's out there, he's seeking to wear out the saints. Amen. And if he can wear you down, he doesn't have to get you in sin, he can just wear you down. And that's something that happens amongst the Bible believers, is we just get ourselves wore down. And we take on a burden sometimes it's not meant for you to bear. And so I'd like to give you a little testimony about myself, hopefully to encourage you. One reason is because a lot of times we're focused on results, especially as a missionary. Yeah. You're thinking about, you need to have something in your prayer letter that's kind of dramatic, something that the churches will say, man, I really like what's going on down there. But a lot of times it's not the case. A lot of times you can't really report anything special that's going on. And for me personally, that could be discouraging. You think about doing something for the Lord day in and day out and then not really seeing anything happen. Well, for one account, I'll give you something I learned about in church history is you go back years and years ago, there's a man named Gilmore, and he was a missionary to the Mongolians. And Gilmore was just a regular old Christian that decided that those Mongolian people didn't hear the gospel, didn't have the gospel like we did. And so he gave up everything he had, went to live in a completely different culture. Not back when it was,
easy.
Yeah, at all. It was very, very difficult, giving up the comforts of this life. And about 30 years working over there in Mongolia. And when he got done serving the Lord, only thing he knew of was 2 converts for those 30 years of serving the Lord. We would look at that and say, that guy probably didn't do a whole lot. Lord didn't use him very much there in Mongolia. But if you follow his story on beyond his death, you end up with many people going to Mongolia and many more people getting saved just from his story. And there's so many characters like that. There's so many characters like that in history. More on a recent, around the 50s and stuff like that, you got a guy that flew down towards the Amazon. And he flew down to try to reach a native tribe that nobody had ever reached, the Aka Indians. And Nate Saint and Jim Elliott, their companions, never was able to lead any of them to the Lord. Right. And those guys ended up getting killed to death on the end of a spear before they even got to one convert. Right. And the rest of that story, his own son even ended up going back and trying to reach those people there in Ecuador. And lots of them got saved. So basically giving you the story about the Lord's going to give you things to do. He's going to tell you to do things, and you're not going to see stuff happen. It's like those children of Israel, they're walking around that wall of Jericho, and they're walking around that thing, and we did this yesterday. Yeah. What's going to happen? We did this the day before. We're on our 4th day, and nothing's happening. And sometimes you may be on that 6th day, you may be in the 7th day, walking around on the 6th time, and you're like, there's nothing going on. The Lord just waiting for you to do that final lap before he opens something up and lets the walls fall down, and then you'll see something. So So hopefully the encouragement will be is you keep faithful in the least, and God's going to do the great thing. And don't worry about trying to accomplish these huge things for the Lord, because it's going to happen all in His time. And for me personally, I had an account with that. My great-great-grandfather, his name was Daniel Marvin Merritt. He was a farmer in Pensacola, and not really a preacher, minister, or anything like that, just a regular old countryman. And he ended up he wanted to have a church set up on some of his property, because the church they were meeting at, it was like a community building, and they could only meet one Sunday a month. So they had to share it with like the Episcopalians and Methodists and all those groups, and then one Sunday a month they got to meet. And they were a Baptist, and they wanted to have church every Sunday. So he split up part of his farmland, that's his livelihood, that's his life. He lives off the land, and donated some of that to start a church building on. They got that church building started. It started to grow from that point, and you fast forward almost 100 years from then, and the church is now a big church, Southern Baptist Church, but all the Baptist church on the corner there, big church on the corner of Main Street there in Pensacola. But almost 100 years from that point, I'm sitting in the church building as a young boy, and the preacher, he's preaching away, he's preaching on hell, and I tell people, thank God, it scared the hell out of me, because I didn't want to go there. I turned to my mom and asked her, what do I need to do? I don't want to go to hell. And it did scare me. I learned then that I was a sinner. I have 2 older brothers. I learned something about them. Neither one of them taught me how to sin. When I think about what I did as a kid, my mom would tell me, Michael, you need to go in there and clean your room. I'd run in there and kick all the toys under the bed and take off and run outside and play, I didn't obey her. So she'd call out there, and I'd be playing around out in the yard. She'd say, Michael, did you clean your room? Yes, ma'am, I did. And those things started coming back to me. When I heard that preacher preaching, I thought, man, I'm going to hell. I lied to my mom. I disobeyed her. I deceived her, and I knew I was a sinner. Not that my brothers taught me how to sin. It's me. It's my fault. And so I asked my mom what to do, and she opened her Bible, Acts 16, led me to the Lord right there, in the balcony of the church, on the same piece of property that my great-great-grandfather donated to start a church.
Amen.
And I like to start off with that, because to me, that's encouraging, because you never know what the Lord's going to use for what you give to Him. It doesn't matter what it is. That's a piece of property. My great-great-grandfather never had an idea that would be crucial to one of his grandkids, great-grandkids getting saved. And so that's something when you consider about mission work, that's something when you consider about your work. You're going to be out there doing stuff, you're going to be out there on the street trying to get the truth out, and it's going to seem like nothing's happening. And that's what the devil's going to tell you. Nothing's happening. You need to just give up and go home. But I can guarantee you, not because of my testimony, but the Lord already promised you His word's not going to turn void. So everything you do is going to be profitable for the Lord's glory. So that's a little bit as far as a testimony for my life. I like to, first of all, apologize for my wife. She said to tell you guys sorry she couldn't be here. Her sister just had a baby, and her sister-in-law had a baby a little bit before that. So they got a bunch of young kids, all over the place and stuff. So she went back home to help out with them until they get their feet on the ground. Then she'll be back with me this coming up week. But obviously, you can see she's the better half. That's my wife there, Lydia. And we are the Huggins heading to Brazil.
Yeah, it worked.
There you go. Okay. I'll stand over here just in case. All right. So to talk about Brazil, I'd like to give you a little bit of its history. And I know a lot of people, they don't find history too much interesting just because they were glad to get out of it when they got out of high school. But really the best thing you can understand about a people is their history, understanding where they came from. and that will help you to learn how to deal with them. And so learning a little bit about the Brazilians, they were discovered in the 1500s. The Portuguese came across back when everybody's trying to discover new land. And when they came across, they automatically dedicated that, set it up. That was going under the Roman Catholic Church. And right now in Brazil, they speak Portuguese. A lot of people, they think everybody down South America is Spanish speaking, but they speak Portuguese in Brazil. And again, Brazil in its beginnings is solidly Roman Catholic. So why is it that Brazil speaks Portuguese and then the rest of the country speak Spanish? It goes back to Rome. The Roman Catholic Pope, he stood up and he told the people, any country past the 130th parallel goes to the Spanish Empire. Any country to the east of that, Portugal can have. Well, and the Pope's somewhat, what he thought was great wisdom is that there's no land to the east of the 130th parallel, so we'll get Spain built up and they're all in favor of me, so Spain will be on my side. And they didn't realize that Brazil was almost completely on the other side. And so that's why Brazil right now has a Portuguese-speaking country. Going back to the Roman Catholics. Now, that gives you a little idea of where they come from. But then also when you look at the country itself, their first flag was right here as an individual country. And it was called the Land of the Holy Cross. So from its beginnings, the Roman Catholic Church has been the foundation of Brazil. And they started the Mass, if you understand the Mass, they hold up a wafer and they tell those people that this turns into the flesh of Christ, and you eat his flesh and you drink his blood. And they teach that literal. Well, obviously, you're coming to a land where there's a lot of heathen, so that's what they did anyway, so that was nothing new for them. And Roman Catholicism was immediately accepted there. They started sending over all kinds of Jesuits and stuff like that to convert a lot of the pagans there. What happens if you fast forward ahead years from that time when Brazil got started? They broke away from the Empire of Portugal. They set up their own country. And when they got that country set up, they finally got their independence there in this is about 1889, several years after their independence in 1822. They wanted to become a republic, and they wanted to become a democracy, so they wanted to be like a great country, they thought. And so you can kind of figure out who they wanted to be like.
Yeah.
They wanted to be like us. Well, when you look at their history, the sad part, obviously that's not their flag today. And you say, why is that? Why didn't that work out in Brazil? They tried to do a constitution like ours. They tried to set up the government like ours. They tried to do everything. They have great resources, just like we had. They had everything you would need to make a great country. And there's no physical reason why Brazil shouldn't be as great as us. And you look at their flag, they tried. They made the attempt. They did everything that democracy says you should do to be great. And it fell to pieces. You say, why did it fall apart? Well, it's obvious that, just like I've been telling you, Brazil's start was very different than ours. They started with the Roman Catholic Church and religion. We at least started with God in the Bible. Very, very drastic difference. And so their country did not get blessed, even though they tried the government we did. Now, looking at them today, Brazil's developing out of a third world country. And this is a video of us flying over Sao Paulo, and just about as far as you can see any direction, there's buildings, houses, many times high-rises. The traffic there is one of the worst in the world. They only let you drive about 1/3 out of the day. So on your license, it tells you what time of day you can drive. If you're driving any other time, you get a ticket. So traffic there is a major problem. Like you see there, there's 20 million people there in Sao Paulo. And that's just because all the people are moving into those cities to try to get work and leaving the farmlands. You guys know what happens when you do that. when you have people moving together without the purpose of seeking God, the only outcome is they get into sin. And they get into things they shouldn't. And so what happens is when you start moving all them people together just for really the love of money, it ends up being a very bad place. So right now Brazil has the third highest number of incarceration out of any country in the world, only followed behind us and China. So they have over 700,000 people in prison right now. So very, very, very large population in the prisons. That's something I've been able to do for the past 16 years. And we have a contact down there in Sao Paulo that's got a prison ministry already going. And we're going to hope to connect with him and get something there. But you notice there about Brazil, it's a very large country. It's the 5th largest in the world. It's the 5th largest by population as well. It's a very large, very high populated country. And like I already told you, they do speak Portuguese there. When you look at the map of Brazil, it's about roughly the size of the continental United States. And most of it, when you see this area, and I were to tell you this is called the Amazon, you guys are thinking about that package in the mail you're waiting on to get, but this is in a rainforest. It's not anything like that. So
That's Amazon headquarters.
yes, yeah. But a lot of people, they don't want to live there. It's hot, it's humid, a lot of dangerous stuff there. So most everybody leaves from that area and they start to move along the coast. And so your population ends up mostly being along the coast. Sao Paulo, that video you saw flying over the city, is down here. And there's 20 million people there. There's 12 million people there. We're going to be in a town about here called Poço Alegre. We're going to be training under Brother Matt Schraus so we can learn the language, learn the people, learn the culture, that kind of thing, and then head out from there. But that's a very high populated area. Just in that little area there is about 50 million people. So almost a quarter of Brazil's population is just in those few states down there. Lord willing, if He allows it, we'd like to get out to one of those larger cities and get some works going there. But that's Brazil. When you walk the streets and you see what's going on there, this is pretty much what you'll see in a lot of the areas. You get to the cities, they're a little bit more touristy, a little more set up. But even in the cities, like this is a picture out of Rio de Janeiro, even in the cities you have these places that we say we have ghettos and we have slums, and we do, but it's nothing compared to what goes on there in Brazil. These are called favelas. And the favelas are basically where the people have left the farmland. Brazil's kind of in that industrial revolution stage like we were in the 1900s. But people leave those farmlands to get business towards the city. They don't have really any land they can buy, so they basically squat on the land, grab whatever building material they can, throw up a structure, just anywhere on a hillside outside of the city, close enough where they can get to work. The problem with that is it's not set up by the city itself. There's no infrastructure there. So many times there's no running water. Sometimes they'll only have one spigot for a whole favela like this. And that's where everybody comes and gets their somewhat clean water.
Somewhat.
Man, there's a lot of times not much power. There's no sewer systems. When you think about what takes place there, you don't have police stations there. You don't have schools there many times. And so you can imagine that kind of environment is really, really chaotic. And it's very, very dangerous. So what you end up having is the drug lords and the gang leaders control these areas. They are the leaders of the favelas. And so really that's an area that's kind of not really untouched, but people just don't go there. We were heading down to Rio de Janeiro, and thankfully we didn't go to the favelas. I'm a white American, I stand out like a sore thumb. You know, you wouldn't see me today if we'd have went there, but those areas, we went down there and we told the people in Brother Matt's church we're heading down to Rio and we'd like to see what's going on there, so Lord would have us do something there sometime. And they gave us a bunch of going away gifts that Sunday night. And we started opening up these gifts, and about 3 of the different families ended up giving us pocket knives to take down there to Rio. They said, we don't even go down to Rio. We're Brazilians, we don't even go down there. So for some reason, they're terrified of that. If you watch the news and stuff like that about the Olympics, you hear all these people getting mugged and stuff like that down there. So you can imagine it's a dangerous place. It's not a place where people really want to live. So what ends up happening? Well, the ones that end up suffering the most are the ones that are really there even more involuntary. You think about that kind of environment, there's no school, there's really not much to do except for get in trouble. Your family doesn't have any money, so you get hooked up with a bunch of kids around the streets and you start stealing stuff. You yourself get on drugs at a very young age, and what ends up happening is a lot of these kids end up living on the street. And most of it is because either their parents abandoned them, because they themselves are so poor they can't handle anything, or they get hooked on drugs, or they end up getting killed by the gangs, or they just don't care anything about their kids and just leave them. And so Brazil has one of the worst social problems of street kids out of any country in the world. There's, on a conservative number, the Brazilians say there's about 8 million kids that live on the street like that. And that's with them owning everything they have on their back, and they live basically like wild animals. And you think about that and you consider that. Some of these kids start off at about 5 years old. Some of them start off younger. They go out with their older brother and sister, and some of them are in diapers, and they set up their own little gangs and stuff like that. But that's how those kids live. And our last time in Brazil, we got to see this a little bit, and Lord really started burdening me about that, just because I didn't grow up like that. I've never gone to bed hungry. I've never had to sleep out underneath the stars. I never had to do that, unless we're having fun camping, and things like that. I never had to worry about, getting mugged and things like that in your own house. And these kids, they live like that every day. And you see, the worst thing about that is they live like that, and their life is miserable. And on top of that, they're dying and going to hell. And you think about, I look at that and I say, what makes it that those kids have a life like that, and I get a life like I had here in America? Is it because I'm so much better than them? And the answer is no. None of us here deserve to be born here. We didn't deserve a life here. These kids, it's not like they necessarily deserved a life living on the street, deserved going to hell and those type of things. We were fortunate enough to be born in this country and to be given the gospel, many of us at an early age. And these kids don't have that. And so we'd like to reach them, get something going with the street kids there as the Lord allows us to.
Amen.
But you think about those street kids, and you think about, that's a sad scenario, but really you see a kid begging for food and you think that's the worst kind of beggar. Some little kid coming up wanting something to eat. But really, I'll tell people this all the time, these are the worst kind of beggars. Because what happens when that beggar comes up and gets some food, it fills their belly and it's something temporal. These guys come before sometimes what they call an altar, and they come into a church building and they begin to what they consider begging before God. And they try to fill up their empty soul. And you know what happens? Religion can't help them out at all.
Right.
The church can't help them out at all. And what happens is they're begging, they go away empty every time. And they come back every time hoping to get a chance to be filled. And they never will. And so I believe that's the worst kind of beggars there in Brazil. Right now, Roman Catholicism is on the decline. And we say that's good. They're still the highest populated Catholic country in the world. But this number here, when you look at this used to be 92%. And when you consider that was back in the 1970s. Almost everybody there was Catholic. Back in the 70s, it was a church state set up, and they were run where only Roman Catholics could be missionaries there. Our mission board director, his family was actually going to head down to Brazil to be missionaries, but back then the doors were closed and they couldn't get in. Well, you say it's a good thing now because in the late 80s, Brazil's passed the new constitution. And now we can be there as Baptist missionaries, legally. And you say that's an amazing thing, that's a good thing, the Lord's opened the door. As that's happened, this number has gone from 92% down to 65%. We think that's good, and it is. But the problem is this number here, Protestantism, is definitely on the rise. It went from about 16% to 22%, but almost every bit of that's Pentecostals.
Wow.
So you think about what's happening in Brazil as they leave the Roman Catholic Church, they realize this religion's dead. Let me go to something that's more active, something that I enjoy more. And they go from one religion that's dead as a doornail to another one that's just as dead, but they're trying to act like it's alive.
Right.
So they end up just as damned as they were in the Catholic Church. And so that's what happens there. They start to get more, as they get more educated, they get more atheistic, more agnostic. Brazil now is about 11% illiterate. Some of the rural areas is about 25% illiterate. So that's pretty high for a lot of countries. Spiritism, they believe in doing good to your fellow man, things like that. If you're good enough, then your next life you get reincarnated to a better status in life. They have, and this others, that's kind of a mix of all your native religions from there, Voodooism, and then also they have their form of Satan worship called Macumba, which is starting to grow a lot there as well. But that's Brazil there, and you look at the religions, you think about what's going to be the major problem with the religions. The one that's a major opponent is right here. This is found in the Roman Catholic Church there. And in the Roman Catholic Church, they have these items, they're called votives, and they're wax body parts. And these wax body parts, this is unique somewhat to Brazil, Roman Catholics. This is wax backbone, wax hand, wax heart. You have on a table here before this little, there's a table of wax heads, wax legs and feet. And what they teach the people is you have some type of bodily ailment, you have something wrong with your head, you have something wrong with your hand, your heart, then you take a pilgrimage to these specific cathedrals throughout Brazil. And you come and bring a certain amount of money and you give it there to the priest and he keeps that body part and prays over it. And you're supposed to get healed. And what they tell them is if you don't have enough faith and you don't get healed, you need to come back, make another pilgrimage, and bring more money.
Pentecostal.
So it is. They speak, the Catholics there also speak in tongues. They do healing services and things like that. But that's what's going on there in Brazil with the Catholics. And they are realizing what it's about. The Brazilians are realizing what it's about. They think, they're telling me that God cares for me and he wants to help me. But what do these Brazilians see? Well, they see that all the Catholic Church cares about is building their kingdom on this earth. Setting up something to where they can have bigger buildings, where you'll have something like this and right outside will be a bunch of poor people. The Brazilian people know it's not about God. It's not about God loving me. It's about religion building its kingdom. So Brazilians are slowly turning from that. But what are they turning to? Well, they can't turn to the truth unless it's there. And so that's why there needs to be more missionaries like this guy. His name's Joseph Domingos. He was the first missionary I visited down there. His wife is Lori. He had started about 9 different churches. I visited those in 2002. I had prayed if the Lord would let me. I had a burden for missions. I wanted to be a missionary. The Lord didn't necessarily call at that time, but I wanted to be a missionary. So I went down there to check out Brazil. We didn't have a missionary from our church down in South America at the time. So I wanted to go down there and see if the Lord would do something. And I had been praying that if the Lord would allow it, let me see somebody get saved. And thankfully this guy here, he was walking down the street. We were meeting in a utility shed in the back of the church. because the city came through raised the level of the street outside the church. So every time it rained, it flooded the church. And they had to raise the level of the floor of the church and things like that. So we were meeting in the utility shed. And that guy there, he was trying to find a ride to the next town over. He heard the singing and the piano coming from the utility shed, walked back there to see if he can get a ride to the next town. And thankfully, instead of that, he found his way to heaven. He ended up getting saved. So the Lord answered that prayer for me. I started to try to get back through circumstances. It didn't work out. The Lord postponed that for me. One reason now, I know why, is the Lord made it clear to me He wanted me to stay there and help out with my dad. He was pastoring the church down there, and basically I did that for the last 15 years there. And I think more important than that, I know the Lord wanted me to learn something. He wanted me to learn what it means to be a minister. What is a minister? That's what we're called to be. And I think about that. I think I learned from the best there is. I think about, when you think about ministering, it's not just teaching the Bible. It's not just preaching. And there's got to be something with the heart there. And I saw that with my dad. We'd go do prison work, and he was 92 years old, going into the jails, preaching to those prisoners, where he could have gone whatever church he wanted to, but he wanted to get the truth to those prisoners.
Amen.
And he'd be 92 years old, hardly able, from pain in his back, to walk, leaning up against the board during his preaching, sometimes preaching 4 times a day, doing chalk talks. And I'd see him, we'd get done with the day, and he'd come out to the van and just start crying over those prisoners, hoping the Lord would reach them. And I looked at that, and I needed to see that. I needed to see it's not about the preaching, it's not about so much the teaching, but it's about the heart of the minister. And I needed to see that. And he cared for those, and that's what I want. I want to have that burden for lost souls, if the Lord allows it, up into my 90s.
Amen.
And so that was a blessing to see. I needed to see that. Also got to learn how to do some chalk talks. We'll see that a little bit. Got to do some of those down in Brazil. But I think also very importantly, Lord saw my life. He said, you're going to need a lot of help. So He gave me a great helpmate. My wife's not here, but we met about 4 years later. We got married in 2008, and she has been a great help. I'll probably do something crazy or forget something or do something off, but it's probably because she's not here. She's always helping me. I do always miss her. We did missions fairs at our church. We'd always try to represent Brazil. That's one of the things we did during our time there. We got to go back to Brazil in 2016, and the first night we were there preaching, Brother Matt Strauss had a meeting there. This lady here, her name was Andrelli. She's one of the church members' niece. They've been working on her to come out. She got saved that first night.
Amen.
Along with this boy, Paulo, and Gabriel, 2 of the church members' kids. We had a meeting the next weekend on a Friday night. This guy's Alvaru's neighbor, this guy here. He's a neighbor, and he got invited out. His name is Joe. And he came out and got saved that Friday night. And the lady next to my wife, her name's Bruna. She was a co-worker of one of the people there, got invited out to church, and she got saved that last night we were there at Brother Matt's church. And I like to show these things to let the people know that these are Brazilians inviting other Brazilians out so they can get an opportunity to hear the gospel at church. And it was their family, it was their friends, it was their co-workers, it was whoever they could come across to try to get them out to church, to give them the chance to hear the gospel, and they got saved. And you guys know, it's not all about just getting the lost people here. It's about going out and getting them where they're at. And we got to do that on the street, passing out tracts, doing some street preaching. And thankfully in Brazil, they haven't learned that street preaching doesn't work. So, this guy here, he heard the preaching from across the street, ended up coming over there and getting saved.
Amen.
And his name is Umberto. And then we had another lady later on that day, her name's Sandra. She came out there and got saved as well. And those people there, you know, from something that's not supposed to work out so well, they got saved. But you think about that, I consider that, when you look at eternity and you look at what's going on in life, you think about, I had a small part of getting to see 7 souls have their eternity change from spending all of that in hell to going to heaven. And I feel like that's the greatest thing you can do. Whatever part you can have in is seeing somebody pass from death to life. That's what I want to get involved in. And that's a great blessing, but the problem is 7 souls is not very many when you consider the need that's down there. And you guys know, you've heard of missionaries down in Brazil, and you say, why is it that Brazil needs more missionaries? Well, you have a number here, when you look at it, there's over 184 million in Brazil. If they follow their religion, they're dying and going to hell. And I don't know if you can imagine 184 million people burning forever just because they didn't hear what you had the opportunity to hear. And that's what we'd like to do, not just for that sake. That's kind of on a humanistic level, but on a level that is called by the Lord. The Lord says the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest that He'll send forth laborers into His harvest. So that's what we ask you guys to do, is pray for us. That's what we'll need. We'll need you guys to pray for us. Our goals there, start to learn the language, the culture. We're working on the language now, but trying to get that language down and the culture, because they're different than us. I'm an American. I don't think like Brazilians. I'm going to need to learn that so I can minister to them. Evangelize the lost, like you guys saw there. Whatever means we can, street work. Right now, the Brazilians are tender towards the gospel. You've seen countries where it doesn't always work that way. They start to get hardened over time. So right now is the time to get there with that. Train national ministers, and I'll tell you this, I don't believe I'm the best person to go down there in Brazil to minister to them. One, because I'm an American. I believe the very best people to minister to Brazilians are Brazilians.
Amen.
So we want to train those nationals that know their people, that know how to reach them, that know how they think naturally. Train them to reach their own folks, as they can do it better. And so that's what we'd like to do there with the nationals, and then establish local churches there. And I think being raised in a local church, being a part of a local church pretty much all my life, in the same church, you get kind of complacent about the importance of a local church. And you forget how valuable this is to you. And I started thinking about this, and deputation really helped me realize how important it is. One, because I got saved in a local church. That's where I heard the gospel. I met my wife in a local church. We got married in a local church. When I started thinking about all those things, I got right with the Lord in a local church. And I think the greatest things that ever happened to me in my entire life happened in a place just like you guys are meeting right here.
Amen.
And I think about, why in the world would I want to go somewhere else if the doors are open here? All those many great things happen to me. The Lord's definitely got a lot more that can happen. I need to be where I need to be. And so that was important to me, because I realized that Brazilian people don't have that. They don't have the local churches on every corner. Down south, I don't know if you guys have been around there, you go there, every other corner is a Baptist church. You don't have that so much here, but Brazil, they don't have it as good as you have it here.
Right.
And so that's our desire, is to get a place where those Brazilians can come and meet, get out of the world and focus on the Lord Jesus Christ, and get to experience what you guys get to experience here. So we ask you guys to pray for us. We're the Huggins. Just tell you this as I finish up here. There's a lady that came to my wife and says, "Oh, you guys, your name's the Huggins. That's a friendly last name." I guess it is a friendly last name. I may not be the most friendliest person, you know. I don't offer hugs, you know. But when you think about that, if that helps you remember us, that's great. We had a little boy praying for us a while ago. We went out to dinner with their family, and he was praying. He said, Lord, please pray, bless these missionaries and bless brother, and he couldn't remember the name. The only thing he remember is, Lord, bless Brother Hug, as he goes down there to Brazil. If that's all you can remember, the Lord knows who we are. So just, if you can pray for a friendly last name, pray for Brother Hug, whatever it is, the Lord knows who it is, and we ask you guys to pray for us. So, all right, thank you.